So let's talk about how the balance of trade and the flow of energy in the form of BTUs and kilowatt hours and megajoules are all netting out in this turmoil of climate policy and energy policy and war and geopolitical game board. Think through the reactions and the consequences of all these stances and policies. First, you've got the US and the EU and the West adopting a code red for humanity ideology whereby it justifies policies that demand bizarre or counterintuitive actions, like shuttering domestic energy in the EU and US, whether it be natural gas or oil. Then these same nations, they've embedded within these policies an all-out dash to wind and solar modes of power generation because of the academic theory or a government ministry spreadsheet saying that that's going to work wonderfully and instantly. But of course, the reality is that they, and here I'm speaking of wind and solar, they can struggle when you try to apply them on a massive scale. They are very costly. They need subsidy and market protection. And they are, by the laws of unpredictable nature, inherently unreliable. Depends on when the wind blows or when the sun is shining. And they are mined and made in places like China and Russia. Now, when the wind and solar at scale do not deliver or do not deliver as soon as they have been warranted to, these nations that bet on the mad dash to them, they're going to have to buy fossil fuels from places like Russia. That's things like the Nord Stream pipelines in action, because to not buy the carbon from places like Russia is going to mean that the lights go out and commerce stops in the nations that are suddenly short on energy. All of this drives up energy prices and inflation for the cost of wind and solar materials and minerals, which then helps Russia and China's economies and hurts the US, the EU, and Western economies. The cost escalation is a transfer of epically massive wealth payment with the currency going in the wrong direction. It's going from out of the pockets of the middle class in Republican democracies and into the coffers of communist and totalitarian states. And we're talking about trillions of dollars in magnitude. Then Russia takes stock of energy prices and its balance of trade and the newfound reliance of Western powers on its energy, and Russia feels emboldened financially and geopolitically, and thus invades the Ukraine. Germany and the EU, they may bark and say that they'll stop buying Russian energy, but they can't do that right away, of course, because it's unable to make the energy balance work. The West, as usual, immediately protests with words, but then it slowly forgets. Russia has been an apt pupil and knows this behavior quite well. So then Russia starts to slowly turn that natural gas valve that goes to the EU toward the closed position, and it reaches an agreement with China where China starts to buy all that Russian natural gas and oil. That's happening as we speak, which is why Germany is on alert when it comes to a pending energy emergency going into this winter. So then China then uses that Russian oil and natural gas to power its mining and its processing and its manufacturing facilities to make wind turbines and solar panels to sell to Germany, the EU, and the United States. Worse yet, this is all transacted at increasingly higher and higher prices because the West environmentalists and the left, they say all this energy turmoil will be fixed by doubling down on the root cause ailments of so-called renewables and the green transition. China's balance of trade, it ends up benefiting massively. So then China uses that balance of trade boost and its newfound geopolitical strength from its gift of energy leverage to build more aircraft carriers and fortress islands in the South China Sea, and their militarization has been growing more than Russia's when you compare them side by side. Russia and Ukraine, that's just an appetizer compared to what might be coming with an emboldened China when you look at Taiwan and all of Asia. So now the EU and Germany and the United States, we have less energy security from domestic oil and natural gas. We rely more heavily than ever on China for our energy security. We can't stop buying Russian energy, and we face epic, as in 40-year high, inflation and economic headwinds. The West is as weakened as ever when trying to stand firm against communism and totalitarianism, and its enemies, they've never been stronger. Now, what was the root cause of all this, and what got all of this rolling? It's climate and energy policies that did not think the basics through, and it didn't think the realities through. Or maybe the originators and the architects of those policies knew exactly what they were doing. So what's more frightening to you, blindly ignorant buffoonery or coldly calculating ideologues when it comes to the leadership of the West these days?